There are three documents sitting in a congressional hearing room right now that the Department of Justice did not want you to see. Not because they contain national security secrets, not because releasing them would endanger an ongoing investigation, because they contain names, specific names, names of men who participated in Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking network and who have, for reasons the department has never explained under oath, been protected by redactions that have no legal basis. Thomas Massie brought those three documents into that room one at a time, and what happened next was not a political argument. It was a paper trail leading directly to the top law enforcement officer in the United States, who sat there and called him a hypocrite rather than answer the question. Let's start with Exhibit 1, because it is the most viscerally damaging piece of evidence presented in that hearing. The lawyers for Jeffrey Epstein's survivors sent a letter to the Department of Justice. In that letter, they included a specific list of names, the names of their clients, the people Epstein trafficked, and they asked the DOJ explicitly not to release those names to the public, to protect them, to do the one thing the law requires when handling the identities of sex trafficking victims. The DOJ received that letter. We know they received it because they released it. They published the entire email in their document production, including the names of every survivor on that list. People who had spent years trying to keep their identities private. People who are now receiving phone calls because the government that was supposed to protect them handed their names to the world. And here is the detail that proves this was not an accident. The DOJ redacted the lawyer's name in that same document. They knew how to use a black marker. They chose where to point it. They pointed it at the attorney and left the survivors exposed. Now stay with me, because Exhibit 2 is where the hearing shifted from damaging to something closer to historic. Massie produced a document titled, in the DOJ's own filing system, Child Sex Trafficking Co-Conspirators. When the department released this document as part of their legally mandated production, every name on it was fully redacted. Every single one. Massie forced the unredaction on the floor of the hearing, and when the names became visible, one of them was Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, one of the wealthiest men in American retail history, not listed as a witness, not listed as an associate, listed specifically in an FBI document as a co-conspirator to child sex trafficking. Bondi's defense was that Wexner's name appears more than 4,000 times in the files, and that this particular redaction was a mistake corrected within 40 minutes. Massie's response was the only accurate one. Corrected within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed. The question that remains unanswered, and that the Epstein Files Transparency Act legally requires an answer to, is when and why the FBI and DOJ decided not to prosecute Wexner. That internal prosecution decision is mandated for release by federal law. It is not in the files. It has never been provided. No explanation has been given. According to sources familiar with the committee's ongoing review of the withheld material, sources whose accounts have not been independently verified, the unreleased prosecution decision documents for Wexner and at least 5 other named individuals contain explicit references to conversations between DOJ officials and individuals currently serving in senior positions in the executive branch. These claims are unverified, but they would explain something that the hearing itself could not. Why a department that produced 3 million documents in response to a congressional mandate is stalling specifically on the few dozen that contain the names of the men who were never charged. Exhibit 3 is the FD 302 forms. These are the formal FBI interview records, the documents where survivors told federal agents exactly what happened to them and exactly who was present. The DOJ is currently releasing these forms in a state that makes them functionally useless. When a member of Congress attempts to view what is behind a redaction on the department's own portal, they are directed to another redaction. Some of the files have been pulled from the portal entirely, making the redacted content impossible to even search. 17 people have reportedly resigned from their positions specifically over the handling of these files. Massie submitted a letter from Bondi herself to Cash Patel, written when she discovered that Patel's team had been keeping files from her, imploring him to stop the withholding. The Attorney General was writing letters to her own subordinate, asking him to comply with a law she was simultaneously telling Congress she was fully enforcing. Bondi's response to all three exhibits followed the same pattern. When Massie pressed on Wexner, she said the name had been corrected within 40 minutes. When he pressed on the FD 302 forms, she pivoted to Merrick Garland. When he pressed on the prosecution decision documents, she called him a hypocrite and accused him of having Trump derangement syndrome in a hearing where Trump's name had not been raised in connection with the files. She also noted, apparently as a closing argument, that Massie had voted against a ban on deepfake AI pornography. 2 people voted against that bill. Massie was one of them. That fact has nothing to do with why Les Wexner's name was redacted from a child sex trafficking co-conspirator list. Its only function in that hearing was to change the subject. According to unverified accounts from individuals with knowledge of internal DOJ communications, the decision to fully redact the co-conspirator document was not made at the staff level. These accounts suggest the redaction was reviewed and approved through a chain that reaches above the career attorney level, meaning the claim that this was a technical error made by overwhelmed document reviewers is inconsistent with how the decision was reportedly made. None of this has been confirmed. What is confirmed is that the department touched the survivor email, made conscious redaction choices within it, and still managed to expose the victims while protecting the lawyer. That level of selective precision does not happen by accident. Every survivor in that room raised their hand when asked if they had been unable to meet with the Justice Department despite requesting contact. Everyone. Bondi had told Congress publicly that the FBI wants to hear from them. The people the FBI supposedly wants to hear from were sitting 10 feet behind her with their hands in the air. She did not turn around. Here is what the law actually requires in plain terms, because Bondi's defense depends on the audience not knowing this. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is not a suggestion. It is a federal mandate with specific requirements, including the release of internal prosecution decisions, the documented reasoning behind why specific individuals were investigated and not charged. Those decisions exist. They are in DOJ files. They are not in the production. The Attorney General cannot claim compliance with a transparency law while withholding the specific documents the law was written to force into the open. Incompetence is not a legal defense for violating a federal mandate, and the pattern of these failures, victims exposed, co-conspirators hidden, prosecution decisions missing, portals redirecting to more redactions, is not the pattern of an overwhelmed bureaucracy. It is the pattern of a bureaucracy that knows exactly what it is doing. Massie said it directly. This cover-up spans decades. Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, and now this. He is not wrong about the history, but he is also not wrong about the present. The current portion of this cover-up belongs to the department currently in charge of it. The names of the men on that co-conspirator list exist. The prosecution decisions exist. The FD 302 interviews exist. The survivors who gave them exist and are still waiting. The documents are in the building. The names are on the pages. The redactions are choices. And the Attorney General of the United States responded to questions about child sex trafficking by calling a congressman a failed politician and citing his voting record on deepfake porn. Stay with us as Massie's next moves on this develop, because the people who called him a hypocrite instead of answering his questions are counting on you to decide this story is too complicated to follow. It isn't. 3 documents, 3 exhibits, 3 things the DOJ did not want in that room. They're in the record now, and they don't go away.